This week, we are back with more activist news, but that might be short-lived. We need your help to keep bringing you activist news from the front lines, unpropagandized and unredacted. Go to patreon.com/actout to become a patron of the show. This week, a special look at the video game, yes, video game, that takes you inside what it's really like to live in war. Next up, if it looks like an article, reads like an article, well, then it's not necessarily a real article. We're dissecting the despicable trend of native advertising where ads dress like news so you consume more and know less. But first, some shaded shame. The days seem to wear inconsequence, like thick southern scenes, greenery steamed in the humid and heat, fanning ourselves with our dreams, wrapped in a shade of our very own shame. The path that we paved for their vice is made at our price. Our apathy swayed, hung in the breeze like strange fruit and with ease. The lynching of morals and empire's laurels. Do you wish to be free? Your will to be free, it ties right to me and on to the others who struggle in chains while you look away. The weight of the system is heavy to throw off now and cast off, but heavier still is to carry it. Will you walk with this weight till the world signs the fate? The 99 died with good intentions, a few bolder mentions, but never enough of a strong intervention. The addicts of hate, greed, of destruction and war kept pushing needles, racking the lines that fed to our base fears and poisoned our minds, filled up our veins with this blurry malaise. We sat back with ease, believed in the creed, the capitalist meme, that digging our graves is worth it, you see. If gold might be found 6 feet underground, bury me deep. And the saddest part maybe might be that we think Earth will care once we leave, that our deaths won't just echo, that this ground won't just let go, happy to lose this pest human please. The apocalypse looks to us for inspiration, plotting our points. Our path is the envy of any true enemy of life, liberty, happiness. Yes, the picture is bleak. The path up to justice unbelievably steep, but we must creep, crawl if we have to, walk when we can, not for the honor or glory of the gods that we made, not for the matter of winning, the matter of sinning. The matter of us is what matters. And if there's no God to pardon your hate and your greed, the apathy swallowed so you could be free, from standing up and giving a fuck, so you could feel safe in your loosened thick chains, so that same malaise could pulse through your veins, so that simple day could wear inconsequence, while you, wrapped in the shade of your very own shame, let slip the humanity, chased with insanity, sat back and with that gave way to the wrong that you know is bred from the bond of capitalist goons and laissez-faire fools when you could have just sat up. Armchair apathetics sit up. The wrongs get you started, the right keeps you going, and there you are knowing that what's right is to fight. Not because you know you'll win, but because you know the only godless sin is to let the wrong be right in the light of your shaded shame. Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your, once again, loud tipping point. So that spoken word you just heard was just dripping with seething judgment against the apathetic, written in a fervor of anger and disappointment. I wanted the verbal equivalent of flipping an armchair over so the laid-back apathetic sitting within would tumble out and land face first into and onto reality. But that being said, there's a time and a place for that brand of pointed passion. Sometimes you want your pointed passion to be a bit more nuanced, a philosophical and emotional guide, if you will, that passes no judgment on the viewer or listener, but instead lays out a scenario and allows them to cultivate their own feelings of remorse, anger, sadness, etc. And one such example comes in the form of a video game. And if you're like me, you may have heard of video games or seen a few people playing them once, but are about as familiar with them as you are with the algorithms that they're made up of. But regardless of how far you are from this creative and technological medium, You have no doubt seen an ad or a commercial for war games. You know, the single shooter style games where it's you, an arsenal that would make Rambo blush, and an ever repeating loop of levels, lives, and ammo. And up until recently, that was really the only kind of war game out there. Well, designers at the company 11-Bit Studios in Poland felt that something was missing, namely the entirety of war outside the front lines of constant combat. This war of mine takes you inside what war is really like, without the body armor and the arsenal, without medicine and food, without shelter and warmth, and with the daily, if not hourly, stress of life and death decisions that you have to make in order to survive and keep your family and friends alive. Will you steal, cheat, lie, even kill? This game asks those questions in the depth of the worst invention of our time, modern warfare. And before we go in depth with the game's creator, take a look at some of the inspiration behind the game, as well as scenes from the game itself.
When I was a little boy, I saw soldiers from my balcony. You woke up and you had nothing left. No food, no electricity, no tap water. There were mortar shells and bombs falling on the streets. There were thugs creeping around houses and shops, killing and looting. After a year, my family escaped the city. I've been thinking about what I saw ever since. I know one thing. It might happen to anyone. War always happens at somebody's doorstep.
For soldiers, war is about victory. For us, it was about getting food. I lived through hell with these people. We were a group. We would do anything to stay alive. I will never forget those days. Things you see in war stay with you forever.
A kiedy przyjdzie także po mnie zegarmistrz światła purpurowy, by mi zabełtać w błękit głowie, to będę jasny i gotowy. Spłyną przede mnie dni na przestrzał, zgasną podłogi i powietrza. Na wszystko jeszcze raz popatrzę i pójdę, nie wiem gdzie na zawsze.
We've been looking at different conflicts, and we are not looking on political background, neither historical background, but what people go through. So we're looking at memoirs, family stories, that kind of stuff, to have examples of what got stuck in people's minds, what were the examples of events that were very symbolic or sensitive or emotional to the people, and based on that, we've created this environment in the game, and also somehow games so far were not only games but pop culture trivialized war. And when you have mainstream uh, Hollywood movies, they are on one hand they are showing war as a adrenaline pump competition, like in Rambo 2, 3, or 7, and such movies. On the other hand, you have movies like Private Ryan or The Pianist or Schindler's List, who picture war as it is, as a horrible festival of demons. I'm not sure it's a good translation. There's a quotation by a Polish author saying that war is a festival of demons, and I think it says pretty well, right, what it is. So we decided to make a game out of it, to somehow make a gamification of those horrible things people go through, but without moralization. And what I mean is that if we would force player uh, to be on either one on the other side, that would be a shallow moral story. So the real challenge was to create an environment in which you can be a good guy or a bad guy. It's like your call. You have one goal to survive, and you can survive being a really good person, but it has its cost. So we wanted to show it. And this trivialization of war in pop culture is sadly quite common. And like I said, in movies, it's not that bad because you have both sides of the picture. In books as well, literature is touching the topic from every possible angle. And in games, somehow, the war was pictured only as except of a few examples, war was pictured as a competition of super soldiers having millions of bullets and fighting evil, and uh, presenting only the good side of being soldier, if there can be one. Well, if you think about it, games can be excellent tool for storytelling because they are interactive. So yeah, sure, they can serve for entertainment. On the other hand, they can serve as a tool to comment reality, human condition, and so on. And this war of mine was decided by us or chosen by us to be such tool. And in the very first moment we decided to do that, we knew we need to approach the topic with a proper respect. We knew it's a game that speaks to people's empathy, so it should be, like I said, it should avoid moralization, rather just make you a judge of your own, moral judge. And we need to approach with a proper respect. So without unnecessary violence, without gore or trivialization of violence in general. What we wanted to achieve is to put you in this environment and leave you, giving you the opportunity to be a bad guy and good guy as well, because then you are forced to make a choice on your own.
Talk a little bit about some of the similarities you've seen in the stories that you've picked up from various war stories.
Well, if you think about it, they are surprisingly, the pattern is the same, because, for example, in Syria, in Aleppo, there's a really good video about Aleppo. It's available on Al Jazeera. It's actually a document movie made by Polish journalists. Uh, Notes from the Dark. That's the English title, Notes from the Dark. So, anyway, we found out that, if you're a father or a mother trying to protect your children, it really doesn't matter if you're Jewish or Polish or Arabic or Russian or Ukrainian or whatever, because you're just a father on your own and you need to protect beloved ones, and you're cut from the necessities or the means you need for everyday's life. And I can give you an interesting example, because I presented the game long time ago when we were doing the development. I think it was maybe not long time ago, but I think it was early 2014, to the guys from Israel and to the guys from Palestine. And for both, the game was about them because they are civilian people. And for them, it doesn't matter what's the background of the conflict between Israeli politicians and the Palestinian politicians. For them, what matters is that they suffered.
So, talk a little bit about the parameters of the game. I mean, is it possible to quote unquote win the game?
Well, you can survive the war. So, we're trying to stay as close to reality in the game. So, everything is based on reality, but of course, mechanics is a game. So, there are some compromises and simplifications. So, the day doesn't last 24 hours, but the day takes like 20 minutes probably in the game. The game doesn't tell you the war will end in 1 week or in 3 weeks or in 6 weeks, but at some point it ends. And if you make it to the end, you've made it. The question is, does it make you a traditional winning person? Because in a game you can win. In this war of mine, not necessarily. You can make it to the end, but the cost may be very heavy. Maybe some other people from your group die on the way to the end. So yes, you can make it to the end. I'm not sure it should be called victory because there are victims on the way, and at the end there's the epilogue, and you can see what was the cost of your survival. Interestingly, you can make it to the end. You can survive war without single act of violence or without single act of theft or any evil deed, as we may call it. But it's really tough, and we made it on purpose to show what is the cost of war. So what you see is like a shape of your civilians, right? And if you take care of them in a good way and you provide food and medication, they are pretty much in good shape. But if something bad happens, I don't know, one of them dies, they are connected one to another, and because of that, they may go broken, and they even may commit suicide if they are in a terrible shape. The game ends when your people die. So obviously you need to take care about them and try to make them stay alive. However, if you make it to the end, but you've made a lot of evil on the way because you had to steal something or even murder someone, uh, we are not telling you how good or bad you were, but we are just showing you the consequences. And this is what this War of Mine does really well, because this game is able to evoke remorse. And what we figure out during the early design is that feeling of a remorse is a very, very, very strong emotion, and the only one, or one of the very few ones that can be evoked only from inside, not from outside. And at the early design stage, Kasper, one of our designers, had a task to check how emotions are evoked in different forms of storytelling. And in movies and books, you're a spectator. So, of course, those forms of storytelling can evoke compassion, understanding, laughter, hate, despise, and such emotions. However, remorse can be felt only from inside. So you cannot feel the remorse when you watch a movie because you're a spectator. Remorse can be raised only from inside based on what you did in the past. You judge yourself in the past and you feel, okay, I've made something bad, and then you are feeling remorse, right? So this is where games are different to other forms of storytelling because they can make you a narrator where you shape the story and you can look in the past on what you did and judge if you were right or wrong accordingly to your moral fiber.
And if you're curious, the game is doing incredibly well, not just with gamers, but with media outlets worldwide, and indeed, people who have lived through conflict. Including, for example, a Vietnamese woman who emailed the developers to tell them that the game helped her understand what her mother had gone through during the Vietnam War. That's powerful feedback. Outside of the commercial success, Pavel takes all of this as a good sign, not just for humanity, but for the whole gaming world, which, as he puts it, is headed for its golden era. Through creative technology promoting empathy, critical thinking, and understanding. The artists at 11-Bit are already working on more thought-provoking games, so in order to learn more and stay up to date, check out 11bitstudios.com. Now, before we wrap up this week, I want to highlight a low-life scum that flies far too often under the radar of we the people as we scan news sites for, news. Unfortunately, a lot of what you're taking in might be as legitimate of a news story as a fucking Gap ad, and no less soaked in private interest money. Let's dig in.
You low-life scum.
Native advertising. The term stems from a 2011 talk by entrepreneur Fred Wilson, who discussed native monetization, aka ways to integrate advertising into a site's basic experience so it doesn't feel alien. So on a news site, this would look like, say, any average article, but would really be a planted ad for a company. For example, take a look at this Netflix ad for Orange is the New Black in the New York Times. Up at the top there, in small lettering, it says, paid ad. Do you see it? Above that fucking ginormous orange graphic that draws your eyes in like a damn tractor beam? Yeah, that ad disclosure is a bit mousy in comparison, isn't it? Furthermore, who expects to go to the New York Times and see an article on, say, prisons? Who expects to go to the New York Times and find an ad dressed as an article on prisons? Probably a shit ton less. In short, these ads are masquerading as legit news stories when they are, in fact, the opposite. They're just a different version of a 30-second YouTube ad that you happily skip. And yeah, some of them are just horrendously obvious, like this one. And in fact, a lot of those lists you see being passed around on social media, like 10 places you have to visit before you die, or 5 reasons he won't go down on you, or 12 reasons why you hate your job, blah, blah, blah. Those are pretty much always sponsored content. Getting eaten alive here. And while it does piss me off that these skewed propaganda pitches are taking up what could be actual news space on a site, I'm more pissed off by the quote-unquote legitimate news sites sharing articles that make it wildly unclear whether this is all just a ruse or actual news. Here's another example. The Atlantic ran this story back in 2013 with that tiny little yellow banner at the top, which you'd have to click on to read more about, which, let's be honest, no one ever does. As former Atlantic employee and journalist Jared Keller noted in his Bloomberg article on this fiasco, this article, which celebrated the church's past year of worldwide expansion, was marked with a yellow banner that identified it as sponsored content. Otherwise, it looked just like any other article on the Atlantic site. Which is, of course, the idea. So this internationally respected 157-year-old magazine put nothing but a small yellow tab between its readers and a ridiculous bullshit story touting the awesomeness of a goddamn cult. And while the Atlantic took down this article-esque ad and promised to do better in the future, most publishers seem more than happy to be a mouthpiece for bullshit. In a survey of 140 publishing executives in 39 countries around the world, 11% admitted to not even labeling native advertising at all. 24% said they label it by giving it a different look and feel, whatever the fuck that means. That essentially means you don't label it, asshole. And I can only imagine what that other 19% is. We put a dancing unicorn in the far upper right-hand corner of all of our native ads. And let's look at the largest percentage, that 52%. Okay, cool. Sounds good, right? Well, according to a Media Radar report from a couple of months ago, while most publishers are labeling branded content, they often violate FTC guidelines because the labels are too subtle or aren't positioned in the correct place. Might I bring your attention to that same New York Times ad? Yeah, I believe that falls into the category of too damn small. New York Times, might I draw your attention to Section 3, Article B of the FTC's Guidelines on Native Advertising titled Prominence. Quote, advertising disclosures should stand out so consumers can easily read or hear them. And you might be thinking, well, that's a bit ambiguous. I mean, what does that specifically mean? Is there a certain ratio we're looking at here? Are the rules the same for a ginormous graphic, like that one, versus an article with no graphics or very small ones? Well, that is part of the problem. While the FTC gives examples of ads that don't comply with the guidelines, it's sort of left up to the publishers themselves to interpret those guidelines in a way that they, or perhaps even more importantly, their sponsors find least intrusive. And while the FTC brought the hammer down on clothing company Lord & Taylor earlier this year, that same Media Radar report found that if the Federal Trade Commission decided to audit publishers' native ads today, around 70% of websites wouldn't be compliant with the FTC's latest guidelines. That's millions, if not billions, of websites serving up ads as if they were real news stories, and in turn, millions of readers funneling this drivel into their brains and storing it under facts and information, as opposed to where it should go, which is somewhere in your brain's trash bin, between Viagra commercials and 8 reasons why you should hate your body. And while one might think that it's all well and good that the Federal Trade Commission did release these albeit vague guidelines, there's 2 problems. One, of course, being that they have to somehow police these billions of websites that are already violating these rules. And according to Ad You Like, Europe's leading native advertising platform and network, native ads will just about double by 2018. The second and more obvious problem is that this fucking happens in the first place. In reality, the FTC's guidelines on native advertising are essentially guidelines on how to deceive people in the nicest way possible. The job of a news site is to report the goddamn news, not promote corporate brands, and certainly not to do so under the guise of reporting the goddamn news. So it seems, as usual, the onus will be on us to be our own regulators and not only keep our eyes peeled for this bullshit, but let people know when you find it. Boycott sites that engage in a lot of native advertising. Because after all, what they and these advertisers want is you, the consumer, the reader. Don't let them have it. Consume your news raw and unfiltered, unpropagandized, and not steeped in fallacy, corporate money, or low-life scum.
You low-life scum.
So that, revolutionaries, will do it for this week's Dose of Dissent. Thank you so much for watching. Please spread and share this with all of your friends, foes, and people you don't know. Check out the last slide to see all the sites that I mentioned in this week's show, and be sure to follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. From the Devil's Den, good night and act out. And real quick, to keep independent, non-corporatized media like this show going, donate at Occupy.com/donate. If you'd like to donate directly to Act Out, visit Patreon.com/actout.